I bought this broken BMW E92 for cheap in the other side of the country, hoping it would be an easy fix, but it turned out that the engine was blown. So previously we rebuilt the entire engine, put it back in the car, and after test driving it, we found out it has low oil pressure. But now it's time to fix this thing. So we ended up the last video with a massive problem. Low oil pressure. Now, if we did not know the history of the engine, if we didn't know what is inside it and what has been done, there could be 20,000 things that could cause low oil pressure. In this case, we have rebuilt the entire engine with new crankshaft bearings, all the gaskets and everything. So I have only one thing in mind that can cause low oil pressure in our case. That is the balancing shafts. But you may be wondering, how can balancing shafts cause low oil pressure? The balancing shafts, they spin and they have bearings just the same as the crankshaft. They have mini bearings that have also clearance and gets supplied oil pressure, so it's working in the same principle as the main crankshaft. And at this point, you saw how worn the main bearings was. Not the main bearings, the rod bearings. Most likely the balancing shaft bearings are also worn. I didn't really think about that when we was rebuilding it, but now after reading a bit, there were a few cases where this has happened to them that we will not find out before we take everything apart. But let's say the balancing shaft is the cause for our issue. There are few choices we have. Choice number one, we can buy brand new balancing shafts. But the balancing shafts are not sold separately from the oil pump. It's sold together as a one unit. The first choice is we have to buy a new pump. We bought a brand new pump without the balancing shaft, so we're not gonna buy a new pump. Second choice we have, we're gonna buy a used pump in a good condition. Third choice, we can delete the balancing shafts. So we know that the 1.6 version come from factory without balancing shafts. A lot of people have deleted them on these engines and they feel no vibration. There's 100% gonna be extra vibration, but the question is, how much? Is it noticeable or is it not noticeable? And with used pumps as well. You can buy it, you can install it, but to be honest, you never know what you buy. So I still haven't decided yet which one of these we're gonna choose. We need to actually strip the car down and check if that is actually the problem. It has to be, because there's no other idea that I can come up with. Now, before we go under and start undoing stuff there, I want to remove the manifold again so I can clean out all of the oil that, well, was because of the broken PCV system. There was actually also a code for the MAF sensor in here. I did replace the MAF, but well, it didn't help. So my only explanation is, because there is no leakings here in the pipes or anything, is that there has to be some oil in the manifold and that's messing up something in that direction. Then the positive terminal for the 20th time. 6. Actually, to make my life easier, I will undo the alternator, because that will make it easier for me to undo the exhaust pipes behind. Now remove the two basket bolts here. Dobrze! Let's dive in. A lot easier with the alternator disconnected. There are two little screws that hold a pipe to the manifold. And that, well, can be tricky to remove. Then at this point we can undo the engine mount. Now, in order to drop the subframe, we must put on the engine bar. Good, for now that will be fine. While we are still up here, I will also remove the oil filter. The oil is pretty glittery, but it has to be because of the bearings from the balancing shaft. I have no other explanation. Here you can see how glittery it is. There are no pieces or anything, but definitely don't like that. That's plenty of space now. Okay, so now we need to drop the subframe. First these things, and then we can drop the V-bar. Okay, I guess the V-bar is going to stay on for now. I hope we don't have to undo the steering column. Jeez. I think that's gonna be enough space, to be honest. I don't think there's anything well under too much tension. Now I need to remove this little shield. Now we can start with the oil pan. Now I lock the flywheel. So now the engine is in time at cylinder 103 DC. And now we can see that the balancing shafts are also in time. Now undo the oil pump sprocket. So now we need to remove all these 3 bolts because in here there are these bearings. This thing here is the oil supply. So that's how they look. You can see how scratched the bearings are. So now if you want to do a balancing shaft delete, this is how you would do it. You would remove the balancing shafts, remove all the bearings, put the cabs back with the bolts in place, and then you need M10 grub screw. So then you would put the grub screw into the oil supply hole in the bed plate. Just like that. With some Loctite, and you just keep it there to block off the oil. And by doing that you would block the oil supply that is going to this hole right here. Then you put the balancing shaft housing onto the oil pump, put everything back together like it was, and it would run. But that is not what I'm gonna do. I picked up a second-hand oil pump with balancing shafts. So then this is how the old bearings looked, with a bunch of scoring marks that you could feel under your fingernail. And this is from the new/used unit. You can see it has, well, some wear, but there's absolutely nothing that you can feel with your finger. And also you can see in the balancing shafts itself. This is the old one, and this is how the new one look. So this is gonna work just fine. I will check all of them, all these three. I'll also put a bit of assembly lube on the bearings. Looks also good. Now we'll torque these bolts to 25. Then the oil pump. Now all these bolts are 10 Newton meters. Now when you install the oil pump, the balancing shafts on the balancer is supposed to point towards the oil sump. So these weights, they're supposed to look down. Then you install this toolkit like this. Then we can go and put this in the car. Now line up the pin onto the timing guide rail. I also cleaned and oiled up the bolts. Now balancing shaft housing to crankcase is 25 firstly. Then it is 90 degrees. Not too much space, but doable. Then oil pump to lower bed plate is 25. Then the oil pump sprocket bolt is 32. Timing chain housing to the oil pump 10. Now remove the locking pin. Clean oil pickup. Good, now the oil pan is on properly. This took a long time. The subframe seems in place. Front subframe bolts 108. I think all oil is out now. So I worked a bit late yesterday, but I managed to, well, clean out the manifold as best as I could, because I really don't want to like wash it with pressure washer or water or stuff like that. So now you could see there's, well, as little as possible of oil. I'm thinking that we will probably anyway need to replace the membrane in the valve cover, but I still haven't got it. So when we will get it, we'll need to open it up while the valve cover is still in the car. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I explained it in the last video. Okay, so I think the manifold is ready to put back in the car now. Now we need to torque and put on the engine mount bolts. 68. Okay. Oh, finally. Yes, okay. Then the intake manifold, 15 Newton meters. Then on with the belt. Oil filter. Good. Now there are still shavings in the engine because, well, the bearings that failed on the balancing shafts. So that's why I'm using this cheaper oil that I'm not going to run for long. Then we will need to change the oil again a few times. Well, that is if it runs properly. That should be 4.25. So now the car is driving, but there's a problem with the misfire on idle. Not so much when the engine is cold, but when the engine warms up, there's a big misfire on idle. And that is caused by the massive exhaust leak. Now you may be wondering, how does that make sense? How can an exhaust leak cause a misfire? Now the exhaust leak is exactly on the flex pipe. The flex pipe, both of them actually are completely broken. So all the exhaust is going out there. And right beside the flex pipe is the O2 sensor. So when the car is on idle, so little pressure on the exhaust that it even sucks in air. And then the O2 sensor sees that, well, there's too much air, and that sends the signal to the ECU to give more fuel, and then it gives more fuel, and then all the mixture is messed up. The way engine works, the 4 O2 sensors before and after the CAD, they taste the exhaust and they, well, can see if it's too rich or too lean, and that adjusts the mixture so the engine can run, well, good. In this case, when you give gas, there's so much pressure that, well, it doesn't matter because all the exhaust is pushing everything out. But when you idle, there's so little exhaust movement that air manages to even come in the exhaust, and then the O2 sensor sees all the excess air and then it sends all messed up signals. So first we need to remove the exhaust. Yeah, so now you can see here's where the exhaust leak is. Everything is off here on both of the sides. So there's O2 sensors here, and there's also some O2 sensor here after the leak. So I think that has to be the reason why it's all misfiring on idle. If that's not the reason, then I don't know. So we need to undo all these bolts, unplug this connector here, one more connector here, and then we need to drop this crossbar and remove the exhaust. And to fix the exhaust, I picked up 2 new gaskets and a whole new flex pipe unit. So I guess we'll need to weld it together with the exhaust. So that's going to be interesting. So I think firstly we need to undo the O2 sensor, which sits, well, it's this one. And then one more back here. Okay, this one's also disconnected. One more here. What? You mad? How many? Okay, this thing was a nasty to remove because there's 2 bolts and yeah. Oh, Aye. So this is the exhaust. And here, where is it leaking? Oh yeah, it's like, look, it's like off. Okay, so this is how it sits. So we need to cut here and weld.
So 55.3.
This is 55 then.
Or how? You just cut from that?
Sure, bro. So we need to put on card now and then weld in place. Oh. So good? Yeah. So now put down. Drop a little bit. Okay, good. Your new shoes? Now we need to add all the sensors that I removed. So as we see, the new flex pipes came with the new bracket itself. But the thing is, the original bracket is very thinny, this one's very fat. So the bolts on the car, they're too short. So that's why I picked up these rust-free bolts, and we'll put them to hold the exhaust in place. So now the old bolts, well, the lower one we cut off, but the top, they're like studs. So we need to somehow remove them. Yes. Yes. Let's go, champ. Let's go. Now the gaskets, brand new. So now there's this sensor on the exhaust, and that is held in place here, up on this little bracket with 2 little bolts. Pretty annoying to remove and install. No place for a ratchet, so we need to use a wrench in the connector. Now, getting now this big massive plate. So now at this point, I have test drove the car and it runs better. But there's still something missing. It runs much better, but when you heat the car up, there's still some jumping in the RPMs. If you guys remember, in the last video we replaced the whole valve cover because the membrane was broken and the PCV system was, well, basically always open, causing the engine to not run at all. But I did not use a brand new valve cover, I used the used one because I couldn't wait to get it running. But I have ordered the membrane itself, this thing, which we will replace, because I have a feeling that that is still the problem. Also, well, I'm out of ideas. So now this thing in here is the membrane. So this is the thing, and it sits like this. And there's a spring in the middle. And there are many ways people do this now. Some people use a hacksaw, some people use a saw. People use a saw to cut around, a Dremel, some kind of a cutting string. One guy I saw was using a heat gun, so he heated up the whole cover and then a metal scraper or a screwdriver or something to, well, pry it off. That is what I'm gonna try first. There's oil. Now, I don't know if I cut it or it was broken from before. I don't know. So I guess we need to clean out this groove here where this lip goes in, which we cut off. Boom. So I guess this thing sits like that, and this is how it closes. Now it's closed, open. I don't know. Maybe it helped, maybe it didn't. So now I glued it, I let it dry. Yep, I got the oil pressure light again. I don't know why. I don't know what's up. Yep, this seems to be the same. We'll use this adapter and we will connect it to the manual gauge. And we will, well, measure the pressure manually. You can also use this and stick this thing into an oil filter, but this engine has integrated oil filter, so we can't do that. Can I remove the sensor without removing the manifold? Probably not. I don't know, but let's try. So the sensor you can see that's the sensor. And I couldn't reach it, or well, I didn't have the right socket. I went to the store and I picked up this big 24 socket that just slides over like this. So this should work. I hope so. Yes, it worked! Now make sure to burn yourself while removing it. Now I will thread in this little adapter into the same hole. Then lightly tighten it with a 17 socket. Then that's how it looks. The hose is plugged in to the block, into the hole where the sensor was, and then we have a whole meter here. And the meter is showing 2.5 bars. So now on idle it's, well, steady around 2 bars. But I guess the oil has cooled down now, so I guess I need to go for a drive and test then. Yeah, so now I'm driving. I have the oil temperature here and I have the bar here. I will, right now it's holding steady. Pretty good, around, doesn't drop below 2 bars. But the temperature is still around 90 right now. So I will drive a bit more to see until the oil heats up properly, and then I will check the oil pressure. So now you can see the oil temperature is 100 Celsius and the oil pressure, well, so now we're stopping. 100. Oil pressure is around 1.5 bars. So now, as you see, there's still problems with the oil pressure. After measuring the oil pressure with the manual gauge, we can see that it is steady on 1.5 bars. That is exactly what it's supposed to be. It is supposed to be at 1.5 bars. It has been lower for some people and it's been completely fine. And 1.5 bar oil pressure when the engine is completely warm, oil at operating temperature 100 Celsius, is absolutely perfect. So at this point I think there is something wrong electrically, because, well, we did have oil pressure faults before repairing the balancing shafts. Before that the diagnostics was showing around 1 bar oil pressure, so now it's 1.5, so it's good. The problem has to lay within something electrical. And the misfire still there, still not running evenly, even throwing an engine fault light on the dash, that's still not fixed. But I believe that in the next video we can fully finish this car. It's going slow, but we are getting closer to the finishing line. So thanks for watching this video, guys, and I will hopefully see you in the next one.